Protect our queens.
This is what makes women's basketball so fire.
I just love playing the game. It's fun.
To see how far the game has grown has been amazing.
They say nobody watching. That's a lot of people. There's a lot of people in there, Martin.
Yeah, I think I've always just been able to get downhill.
When recess came, I had my sneakers on.
I hit them with a hezzy. After that, they quit.
Protect our.
What's up? What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Protect Our Queens podcast presented by Basketball Society. With me, as always, my guy, my brother in Christ, my partner in women's basketball crime, Martin Soares, and returning to the show, I believe our first returning guest is the one and only Nick Andre. Nick, my boy, how we feeling tonight, man?
I'm great, man. It's a pleasure to be back on, man. I had a really good time the last time I was on, man. I know that was during the W season, but now we're about to talk some March Madness, man. So I'm excited, man. A lot has happened, and I know that we're going to dive into a lot of it, man. So I'm excited to talk hoops with y'all again.
Absolutely, man. Always a pleasure. To all of you that are currently watching, will be watching, or is watching on the playback, we appreciate the support. Please, as always, feel free to chime in the chat, both live or on the playback, as we dive into what is sure to be a packed show. We're going to talk about some key takeaways from these first couple rounds of the tournament. We're going to make some bold predictions for the Sweet 16. But before we get into that, we do have to start the show on a bit of a somber note, because unfortunately, last night in the first quarter of USC's second round game against Mississippi State, Juju Watkins suffered a knee injury, which would turn out to be revealed to be a torn ACL. She is done for the season, likely going to miss a large chunk of, if not all, of next season as well. Nick, we'll start with you. Just general thoughts, reactions, all that about Juju tearing her ACL last night.
Yeah, I'm hurting for Juju, man, because I know that this is like the last thing she would want to suffer, especially at this point in the season. I know that many people feel a way about USC, and even me, I have my questions about USC, especially heading into the season, especially with them building chemistry and everything. But as the season slowly progressed, you started to see them kind of slowly figure it out, even if they weren't people's favorites to possibly win the title. As long as they had Juju Watkins on the team, they always had a chance. And for her to go through an injury like this is just a big loss for, obviously for her and USC, but then it's also a big loss for women's basketball. This is one of the focal points and one of the biggest faces in women's basketball, honestly, man. So just me watching it live last night, I instantly knew that it was something serious because, obviously once you saw Juju go down and then she was holding her knee, and then on top of that, her having to be carried off the floor by with the trainers and everything, that pretty much showed me that, yeah, this is something definitely serious. I was hoping not. I was hoping that it was just, something like just a small injury. Maybe she could possibly come back. Yeah. But now, like once it was announced recently that it was a torn ACL, it just crushing me as a fan. I know that it probably crushes the whole team. Give credit to USC for finding a way to still win that game last night against Mississippi State. Give credit to Kiki Iriefenu. I think about like 36 points in that matchup. But it's just a big loss, honestly, man. And, not only for USC, going through the rest of this tournament, but obviously potentially even all of next year too, because, who knows how long it's going to take for Juju to rehab and then, of course, return back from the injury, honestly, man. So it just sucks at the end of the day because I feel like Juju was arguably playing some of her best basketball as a recent, especially down the stretch of the season, and, of course, throughout the conference tournament and then, of course, the NCAA tournament. So it's just a bad loss, honestly, man. And, I just wish her the best.
Yeah, like for it to be one of the marquee stars, like it sucks for anyone to get hurt, but for it to be Juju, man, that it was really crazy to see. I was watching the game live too, and obviously the arena went quiet. And I even said, I was watching with my brother, and I even said to him, like, man, first of all, they were Mississippi State. They were dreadful from the beginning of that game, but they got even worse after Juju went down because the crowd was booing them and kind of blaming them for the Juju injury. And I think they were just too rattled. Like the situation was already kind of weird. And then the crowd was like on them even more because they were kind of blaming them for it. And so I just think I don't think it was that hard for USC to go on and win that game. Also because what people hate to admit is that USC has really good players outside of Juju Watkins. And I've seen a lot of people complaining about Juju's teammates, saying they don't do enough, saying they're not that good. And I'm like, it sucks that it took something like this for people to remember how good Kiki Iriefenu is, how players like Kennedy Smith and Avery Howell and some of these girls can really play. Kaylee Heckle, some of these girls can really play. Like, and we're big time players coming out of high school. So I know a lot of people are talking about the coaching job that Lindsay Gottlieb has to do now. And of course, it's a bit much taller task without Juju. But yeah, it's a huge loss for USC. Obviously, it sucks for Juju, especially, of course, like to be in a position to make a Final Four, possibly national championship run in the prime of her career. Man, that really sucks. She's all over these Nike ads and commercials and stuff now. And it's like now every time we see her, we're just reminded. But I'll say I saw someone put up a really good tweet. All these players had an ACL tear or an Achilles and came back stronger. Sue Bird, Kelsey Plum, Brianna Stewart, Tamika Catchings, Diana Taurasi, Janae Agumake, and Paige Beckers. So when it happens, and a lot of athletes who deal with the ACL tear, I never dealt with that, but a lot of them say like when you recover, when you rehab the right way, you really do come back stronger. And so that story will be cool. And I mean, it sucks. Like there's nothing good about it. But I do look forward to seeing this kind of part of Juju's story unravel, because it's like we saw Paige have to go through it, and we're going to talk about Paige and UConn in a little bit, and we're seeing Paige on the back end of it with her injury history and stuff, and she's come out stronger because of it. So it sucks that it had to happen and that this is part of her story now. And it really affects the tournament because now there's like an asterisk. It's like one of those things where one of the best players goes down, and now we kind of really won't ever know what the real outcome of this tournament was going to be if everyone was at full strength. Obviously, she's not the only player that's injured, but she's the biggest caliber star that's gone down now. So it really kind of just puts a little bit of a dark cloud over this tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I think my big takeaway, and obviously, you know, Nick, you alluded to it with Kiki having 36 some odd points or whatever it was last night. Like, I think, I personally, I don't think that USC's title hopes are like greatly, they are greatly dashed, right? Like it's going to be much difficult. It's going to be much more harder for them to go out and actually win a national championship without your best player, obviously. But I do think that from what we saw from Kiki, I don't think that like we can completely write them off. On the
They
Juju side of
UConn
things,
without Juju. They can't beat UConn without Juju. Maybe Kansas State.
No. Yeah, that's my thing too. Because I
can't beat
still,
UConn without Juju.
yeah, and that's crazy because I still give USC a chance to get to the Elite Eight. I do think that they have a chance of beating Kansas State, but it all depends on how Kiki Area-Fan comes out. It all depends on how Kennedy Smith comes out. Like if they can take that momentum from what they had in that game against Mississippi State and capitalize off of that heading into this next matchup, I definitely give them a shot at winning. I know a lot of people still have USC written off and everything, but I do think that they still have a chance of getting to the Elite Eight.
They're still good. They could pick up momentum. They could, depending, like you said, depending on how they play in that Kansas State game. If they pick up momentum, there are players still there. They could win a game or two. I just don't think they can beat UConn without Paige.
no, I don't think they can. I don't think they can beat UConn either. But I definitely don't think that. I definitely don't think it's completely out of the realm of possibility either. Like I think it is now. Unfortunately, what this means though is that it's going to require Lindsay Gottlieb to do something that she
coach her behind off.
Which is
If Lindsay can find a way to get USC past UConn,
Out coach Gino.
yeah.
Hey, man.
So it's a tall task. So that's the thing. So I think because Martin, you're right. I think from a player talent standpoint, I don't think they're incapable of competing on the floor as far as talent for talent. I think the issue for USC in a potential matchup against UConn is going to be Gino's going to coach circles around Lindsay Gottlieb in that matchup. And so she's going to have to muster up the strength of USC legends past or something to figure out a way to get past. But if she's able to do that, then I mean, the world is their oyster, I guess, in that regard. To your point too, though, Martin, it's actually funny because I was thinking you talk about how like now every time you see Juju, you kind of think about it. Like I think I was watching something earlier today, and I saw maybe like 3 or 4 ads or commercials that had Juju, and I was like, dang, like there's no Juju, like there's no more Juju. And I said this to Martin before we started. I think, and again, this is just strictly me coming as a fan. I don't want to sound selfish, but I think the part about this that really sucks for me as a fan is that conversation that kind of started brewing a bit about like who's better between Juju and Caitlin as far as like greatness is like it feels like this would have been the season where that really could have been at least settled. And now we're going to have to wait a little bit longer because Juju was on pace to, not just potentially win a national championship, but she was on pace to break a lot of the records that Caitlin Clark set as far as most points in 2 years, most points overall, 3-point makes, all that stuff. She was, I think, approaching becoming the second player ever or the first player ever to get like 2,000 points in a certain amount of time or something like that. Like she was on a run this season. And obviously now all of that has now gone up in smoke because of the ACL. We do wish her nothing but the best. And we send obviously our thoughts and prayers to Juju Watkins as she begins this, what is sure to be a long road of recovery from the ACL. As Martin mentioned, there is a lot to talk about tonight. So please make sure that you are staying tapped in with us throughout the course of the night as we talk about a couple things. The first order of business is going to be some key takeaways from the first and second rounds of the tournament. And Nick, we want to start with you. We know that you obviously have covered Florida State all season. We know that you're hurting a little bit because LSU did them bad the other day with that loss. It was looking a little bit close, and then something
Ran
just
it for a while, and then
they ran it for a while, and then they weren't. What are some of your key takeaways from Florida State? Not, in the tournament or from the entire season. What are some things you're looking at?
Well, first and foremost, give credit to LSU. LSU had a really strong showing, and I would just be real, they outplayed Florida State. I know I can be biased at times, but I got to give credit where it's due. You look at Anissa Morrow, who had damn near a triple-double in that matchup. You look at Michaela Williams, who was literally able to get whatever she wanted on the offensive end. And this is all going on with Flau'jae not even having the strongest performance. I can't remember exactly how many points Flau'jae ended up with, but she had a slow first half, started to kind of come alive, throughout the third quarter. But when you look at the overall view of this game, give credit to Florida State. They kept it close. Tanaya Latson had got off to a really strong start. Scored the first 12 points of the game for Florida State, had 23 points in the first half, finished with 30 points. But the biggest thing was Florida State only had 6 points in the third quarter, and you're not going to win tournament games like that, especially going up against an LSU team who is a former champion who won the championship 2 years ago. So obviously, a bad second half definitely played a role in it as well. But I just think that LSU just beat Florida State in so many aspects of the game. Offensively, they were really crisp in the offense. The ball movement was spectacular. Backdoor cuts was really good. They were really finding higher percentage shots on the offensive end. And then defensively, the way that they were just able to control the boards and they were just able to dominate on the defensive end was really good as well. And I even said, like, one of the biggest focal points in that matchup had to be rebounding, because LSU is a great rebounding team, but also Florida State's a good rebounding team as well. And I know that, and I even tweeted this too, I know that people were really focused on the matchup with Tanaya Latson and Flau'jae Johnson. Obviously, both of them go back to AAU days. But my favorite matchup, the one that I was looking forward to the most, was Michaela Timpson and Anissa Morrow. And I was thinking, whoever had the edge in that matchup, especially, on both ends of the floor, they're going to come out with the win. And I gotta give credit where it's due. Anissa Morrow definitely outplayed Michaela Timpson. Michaela Timpson only finished with about 14, 15 points in that matchup. But that was pretty much it, man. I think Florida State kept it close throughout the first half. It was a really strong showing offensively, but just collapsing in the third quarter and not being able to capitalize, and just watching LSU open up the lead like that, that was pretty much the writing on the wall, honestly. But even despite losing in the second round, I give a lot of credit to this team, because this team definitely showed tremendous growth over the year. This was a team that got bounced in the first round of the tournament over the past maybe 4 or 5 years. They came into the season with a different approach. Ended up switching some things up, like scheme wise. I think they elevated their defense, being able to pick up full court, be able to apply pressure. You saw Tanaya Latson. I know people rave about Tanaya Latson as a scorer, but I think people don't pay attention to how much she improved her game overall. Honestly, she showed that she could be a lead guard as far as being able to initiate the offense and being able to run a half court offense as far as her playmaking. She improved tremendously on the defensive end as far as being a great on ball defender, being able to pick the passing lanes. So it was pretty much being able to set the tone for the rest of the team. And I even talked with Tanaya about this even before the season, and she told me that she was going to take her game up to another notch. And I knew that she would, but I didn't expect this type of season. Being able to lead the country in scoring and just being able to be in that conversation as one of the best guards in the country. So give credit to her from that aspect. Michaela Timpson had a strong showing in her senior year. And honestly, if you ask me, I think that she is a sleeper in the first round of the WNBA draft, honestly. Other players as well stepping up, Maria Gordon, another great senior. Players like Sydney Bowles, who came in as a transfer from Texas A&M. She had a really strong showing as well. So it was a great all-around season, honestly. You look at a lot of the highlights that took place. Tanaya hitting the game winner against North Carolina, Florida State going to Notre Dame's house and being able to get that win as well. And that was that was pretty much off Tanaya missing damn near 2 weeks due to an injury, and still her coming into that game and being able to outplay both Hannah Hidalgo and Olivia Miles. So I know that people may look at it, of course, it's disappointing to lose in the second round because this team did have expectations of possibly getting far in the playoffs, especially with the year that Tanaya had and the other players had. But when you look at the overview of this season, this was definitely a much improved year, especially compared to over the past maybe like 4 or 5 years for Florida State.
I mean, I was telling Martin this earlier. I was looking at because I anticipated that we would get a Michaela Timpson mention, because every time I open Twitter, it's the running joke with me and Martin. Every time I open Twitter, I'm like, Nick's talking about Michaela Timpson again. every time I open Twitter, it's that or he's talking about some obscure album that he was listening to this morning. So I was doing some digging, and I will say this, and I'll ask you this question. There were 2 players. I thought this was interesting. There are 2 players that entered the tournament this season who averaged at least 17 points and 10 rebounds. One of them was Anissa Morrow. The other player was Michaela Timpson. Wow. She was the only player also to average at least 5 steals and blocks combined. And when I watched a little bit of the George Mason game, I was thoroughly impressed. I was like, let me watch the George Mason game. Let me see what's going on with Michaela Timpson. Let me see what she's talking about. And I was thoroughly impressed. I liked everything that I saw. I think she had 18 points, somewhere around there, maybe 10 boards, I think. I think that was like her 16th double-double. And again, when I'm just doing some digging, she had 8 of those double-doubles. She shot 60% from the field. So like, I agree with you, Nick. Like, I think she could be a steal of the draft. I don't know if she would be a first-round pick, just because I think, and I posted this on our Instagram page, I think this guard class, the potential guard class for this year, is just going to be really, really deep. And I think we're going to see a lot of guards get picked up in the first round, especially later on as well, because there are a lot of teams, especially in that second half, that could use some guards. But I do agree with you. Like, I do think that Michaela Timpson could be a steal of the draft. I think that not necessarily play style, but situationally, I kind of think about how last year in the draft, Liz Kitley slipped out of the first round into the second round because of the ACL injury. And so no one picked her up in the first round. She ends up obviously being in Vegas, and we just signed her to her rookie scale contract this season. I think that Michaela Timpson could be in a similar situation where, just because this draft is going to be so guard heavy, she could mess around, slip into the second round, and someone could end up with a diamond in the rough on their hands. I was thoroughly impressed with what I saw from Michaela Timpson in the George Mason game. And the little bit that I got a chance to look at during the LSU game, I will admit I was my blood pressure was going up and down, because I was also watching the second half and overtime of the Maryland game at the same time, and like losing my mind at that. But
I missed that great game watching Florida State get blown out, man. I'm hurt, man. I gotta go back and watch it tonight. Actually,
it was a great game. I was going so crazy at the tail end of that game. Martin told me to stop texting him about it. Actually, that's how nuts I went. I couldn't take it.
Double overtime. I'm like, bro, it's okay, because I watched it mostly through like towards the end of the fourth quarter. Then I had to step out to get some dinner, but
I couldn't.
Yeah, Marcus was texting me updates. I'm like, dude, I was following on the box score, play by play on my phone. I'm like, yo, it's too stressful, man. You don't have to keep texting me. Just let it be. Let God handle it, and we'll see what happens at the end.
But I do agree with you. I do think that Michaela Timpson can certainly be one of the steals of the draft this year for sure.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it speaks to, like, there's so many good players out here, so many really good players. It's hard to keep up with. There's a couple I'm going to mention in a little bit that I just didn't know about until I finally got a good look at them. And yeah, they're going to keep coming. They're all over the place. I think for me, one of the biggest takeaways from the first round was the fact that 6 teams scored over 100 points in the first round, which is an NCAA tournament record. South Carolina, Notre Dame, Tennessee, UConn, Texas, and LSU. And even though they were all blowouts, like real blowouts, like that other team didn't even look like a Division I basketball team on the floor with them. And of course, it just speaks to the talent disparity, which we know really exists. But at the same time, you're just looking at even the kind of teams that, I mean, for Tennessee to be one of those teams grouped with UConn and South Carolina and LSU and, Tennessee, they might come up later too, because they're a team that is super deep. Obviously, their style is like the 5 in, 5 out that Kim Caldwell likes to play, but they have real depth. They have good players that come in. They're athletic. They run. They shoot threes. They're long. They press. So their style of play, that their game against Texas is going to be interesting. But for them to be grouped into one of those 6 teams that scored over 100 points in the first round. Again, that's an NCAA tournament record. So we can say that first round games are always blowouts and they're always that way, but this is the first time that many teams have scored over 100 points. So I think the scoring output is really sticking out for me.
I do agree with that. It's funny because I think we talked about earlier on in the season on the show about like what the magic number would be as far as like how many points we're getting to in terms of like being successful and being potent offensively. And 100 points for that many teams to score 100 points, like, yeah, a lot of them were good at blowouts, but that also speaks to, again, what you and I, Martin, have talked about a lot on this show, which is just the parity and the sheer amount of talent that's across the country in women's basketball that like we're not talking about enough. I mean, like, I know it was a second round game, but Sarah Ashley Barker had 45 points in the game against Maryland the other or yesterday, and that's like a school record. Georgia Amore, again, in their game against Kansas State, she had 34, and I think that tied the SEC March Madness record or the school record or something like that. Like we saw so many offensive explosions throughout the course of these first couple rounds. Like it's fun as a fan to sit down and know like you can watch a basketball game and watch any team and someone can go off like that, but also a bunch of different teams that you might not expect. Like Tennessee, for example, you would never expect a Tennessee with the way they play basketball to be putting up 100 points, but they did that. And that just speaks to the talent that's across the country. And I didn't know that. I didn't know that many teams had scored 100 points in a game.
And I wasn't surprised when I saw the record. I must have saw it on social media, but like the more I kept looking at scores, I kept seeing Hundo. I'm like, man, these girls, they're putting up points. And shout out to your point, Marcus, shout out to some of the girls who really put on great performances, even in losses. And a lot of girls whose careers, not just their season ended, their careers ended. Diamond Johnson at Norfolk State had a good showing against Maryland. Jada Curry at Louisville, Lucy Olson at Iowa. A lot of the teams on the losing end had a player that really had a stellar performance. And it's like, man, I wish I could see her more. But I mean, it does speak to the parity of talent all across the country.
Yeah. Go ahead, Nick.
I would say I 100% agree. I think we've really been able to show. I think a lot of these players have really been able to showcase like their true talent, especially throughout these first rounds of the tournament. I mean, we're seeing so many great performances, like Marcus, you mentioned Sarah Ashley Barker and what she was able to do in last night's performance against Alabama. You talk about Lucy Olson as well, Martin as well. So I'm glad, and I think another player as well is that I really wasn't familiar with before the tournament was Maggie Dugan from Richmond and what she was able to do.
Yeah.
In the first couple of rounds. I mean, obviously in the first matchup against Georgia Tech, which I'll be real, I did not expect Richmond to beat Georgia Tech like that. I mean, I did have Georgia Tech winning, but I didn't expect them to get blown out like that. So that was really impressive as well. But even in the UCLA game, she had a really strong showing, especially in the first half. So I love how a lot of these players are getting the opportunities to not only showcase their talent, but also do it on like the biggest stage of the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
My big takeaway comes from the second round. I mean, the first round for me was pretty chalk as far as like what I expected. My biggest takeaway from the first couple rounds of games is I think Tennessee is going to do Texas really, really bad.
I'll be real. I have them winning too.
I think they're going to do really, really bad. Like so a couple days ago, I went on Instagram and I posted a reel of me reacting and I to the Final Four or the 4 number 1 seeds once they were revealed, and I said flat out, whoever wins the Tennessee Ohio State game is probably going to beat Texas when they match up. And this isn't my bold prediction because I watched Tennessee. I watched that entire game against Ohio State, and they did Ohio State really, really bad. Like they forced, I think, 20-something turnovers in that game. Talasia Cooper had 7 steals in that game. Like they were all over the place. It seems like it seemed like down the stretch of that game, every time you looked up, they were forcing another turnover. And when I look at Texas and when I look at Tennessee, these are 2 teams that matched up at the beginning or end of January, somewhere around then. It was a really, really tight contested game. And then I watched Texas get absolutely dismantled in the SEC championship game against South Carolina. and I watch Tennessee do this, like I think Tennessee is going to do Texas really, really bad in that game. I don't think Texas is going to be able to handle the defensive pressure that Tennessee is going to apply. I think that Talasia Cooper is likely going to be the primary defender on Roy Harmon, and she's going to give Roy Harmon a lot of trouble. And I think Tennessee's length is going to be very difficult for Texas to handle as well. Like I don't mean just like beat them. Like I think they're going to do them bad. Like they might win that game by 15 or more. If this is the defensive intensity that we're seeing from them, and they're able to maintain that, they were full court pressing like in the third quarter, just because they could and because it was working. Like if they can continue that, and Martin and I already talked about how Texas is likely, the weakest of the number one seeds. Obviously now that might be a little bit adjusted, obviously because USC doesn't have Juju anymore, and so of the 4 number 1 seeds entering the tournament, you look and say, okay, maybe Texas doesn't make it to the Final Four. But like after looking at how Texas has come out the first couple rounds, looking at how Tennessee has come out the first couple rounds, Tennessee's going to do them bad. Like I think they're going to do them bad. And if I didn't have an even bolder prediction, that would have been my bold prediction for tonight. But I think they're going to do them really bad when they match up.
Yeah, I mean, the big stat for me in that Ohio State game was 38-18 bench points. Tennessee's depth is what makes them killer, and they can press like that, and they can score up to 100 points because, again, they play the 5 in, 5 out, so they don't let girls get tired. Everyone plays around 20 minutes, and they have good players that they rotate in and out. It's not much of a drop off. A big impact player for me on Tennessee, who I really love watching when I watch them, is Z Spearman off the bench. She is just long, athletic. She is such an impact player. Not like super polished offensively, but just like she's such a presence with her size and her athleticism, and she fits so well in that system. I think that's where Tennessee is going to really hurt Texas, is with the depth, because that's where Texas is lacking. They have the size, but I think Tennessee, if you're right, Marcus, Tennessee is going to look to run them off the floor because Tennessee has the depth and they're just faster, more athletic, more of like a guard wing oriented team. But that spells trouble for Texas. That is a bad matchup for them.
Yeah,
I agree with both of you guys. And it's funny too, and I can't believe I'm even saying this, but I actually had South Florida beating Tennessee in the first round, as crazy as it is, because I think people don't realize how good South Florida actually is. But once Tennessee beat South Florida, not only beat them, but they pretty much dismantled them as well. I was looking at the bracket and I was thinking, oh yeah, like Tennessee might actually have a chance to get to the Elite Eight. They got to play Ohio State the second round. Ohio State, talented team, but they have moments where they're not as disciplined as they need to be. And that's why, they end up losing momentum and then teams end up taking advantage. Clearly, you saw Tennessee be able to do that. Now you have Texas in the next round. And, I know people feel a way about Texas. Texas, I think they finished the season number 1 overall on the AP poll. Obviously they have Madison Booker, they have Roy Harmon, they have a collective of great talented players. But I was thinking to myself, like, man, like I think Tennessee really has a really good chance of winning because they may not be as talented as Texas, but when you talk about just that 5 in, 5 out style basketball and just how they press on defense and just how they really control everything, like they rank number 1 in offensive rebounds this season in the entire country. And you see how they're able to capitalize off of second chance possessions. And crazy to even think about that, because they were like one of the top offensive teams in the country as well. And I'm thinking to myself, like, man, like this team's not even like talented. They don't even have a go-to score on this team, but it's just the way that they're able to capitalize off of creating turnovers, off of getting offensive rebounds. Like they really scrap. And I think that physicality that they play with, like that hustle that they play with, they could possibly get Texas out of here. So I definitely agree with you, Marcus. Like I definitely have Tennessee beating Texas. It's probably gonna be one of the biggest upsets. But honestly, as well, alluding to your point, like when you look at the overall number 1 seeds as well, like to me, like the only legitimate one is South Carolina right now, especially with the way that they've been playing over the first couple of rounds. I'll be real. I know UCLA won the first 2 games, but I'm really not as high on them, honestly, because I felt like, especially in the first half, Southern, I think, gave them a really good showing. I thought Richmond did the same thing as well. Now, look, I give credit to UCLA because UCLA they were able to capitalize in the second half of those games and find a way to open up the lead. But I'll be real, as the tournament continues to go on, honestly, the competition gets tougher. And I'll even say this, I think Ole Miss has a chance of getting them out of here as well, especially with the way that Ole Miss plays defensively. They're another team like Tennessee, that's not as talented offensively, but they definitely get after it defensively. So, now look, I'm not guaranteeing the win, but I definitely believe that Ole Miss definitely has a shot to get them out of here as well, honestly. So that's going to be a really good matchup in the Sweet 16 too. But like I said, obviously when you look at the overall number 1 seeds, Texas may not be as strong. Obviously, USC now with Juju gone, they're not as strong either. UCLA has had their inconsistencies. Like, to me, I think the best number one seed has been South Carolina throughout these first rounds, especially with what we're seeing on both ends of the floor from them.
Agreed. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a fan, but I 100% agree. We appreciate all you guys that are tuned in with us and all you guys that are watching on the playback. Please stay tapped in. And as always, feel free to chime in the comments. We are going to jump into our bold predictions. And Martin, we're going to start with you. But before we do that, a couple months ago, Martin and I talked about whether or not Paige Beckers was overrated. And this is what Martin had to say.
If AZ Fudd is back healthy and confident, that's a Final Four team. But again, listen to the coaches. The way Gino was talking about his team, the clip we played last week compared to how he's talking about his team after they beat South Carolina, even he's talking Final Four now. So he sees it. He's seeing, and this is the time that that's why you went off last week about it. It's like, hey, UConn, if you're going to show us that you're a legit title contender, it comes in this game against South Carolina. And they didn't just win, they dominated. So I think they're ready at this time to show that they're trustworthy to be a Final Four team.
I called out UConn before the UConn South Carolina game, and they very handily packed up my favorite women's college basketball team. Martin Sories promptly came on this show and said they looked like they were primed to be a Final Four team. We're talking Sweet 16 bold predictions. Martin Sories, what's yours?
So I know I got something to say about Paige, which I felt like I had to say here, but my bold prediction is separate from that. So I'm gonna work this out here. Sure. My bold prediction, I have become very high on Oklahoma. And I didn't really see them at all this year. And if I had, I'm sure I would have been screaming to the hills about one Sahara Williams. This chick is the real deal. I watched that whole game against Iowa, and obviously they dominated them, but like literally first bucket of the game, Sahara Williams, 2-dribble drive, left baseline. If there wasn't someone right in front of her who she chest to chest just bodied and laid, she probably would have tapped glass on the finish. Like, she is so athletic, strong, skilled, like great passer. They get her the ball in different spots. She can shoot. She can go off the bounce, off the dribble. She's super strong, and she's a really good passer. It seems like she's only a sophomore. Like, sign me up for some Oklahoma. And just looking into what they've been doing more again. I didn't even realize they were in the SEC. I know there was so much movement with teams changing conferences this year. I still thought Oklahoma was Big 12. So that's how behind I was on Oklahoma, not realizing they were even in the SEC right now. But I also saw that they set an NCAA tournament record in their first round game against Florida Gulf Coast. They had 72 rebounds in that game. 72 rebounds. How were people not talking about this every day on podcasts, on sports shows? 72 rebounds? There are teams who didn't score 72 points in the games in this tournament. So when you watch Oklahoma, clearly you see and hear they have the size. And of course, Reagan Beers is the name that most people know. And she's so good. She's so skilled. Love me some Reagan Beers. But it's not just her. It's Sahara Williams, who I just mentioned, she's listed 5'11", but she plays like a big forward on the wing, and she's physical and hits the glass. And they have other, like, even their other guards and bigs, like they have the size, but they also just play good basketball. So I'm really high on Oklahoma right now, and I think their matchup with UConn is going to be a good one. Sahara Williams is going to have to really show out, for them to compete. But I'll also throw out the name Peyton Verhulst. This white girl is different. She does not play like a regular white girl, yo. She lets that thing go. She hit the Smitty on a couple of her drives, and that Iowa game, drove it, came back, hesitate, and come back. She is not a regular white girl. Peyton Verhulst. Let it be known. Say her name. That girl is different. Like Oklahoma, I was texting you during the game. They have good players. Like this isn't just a highly ranked team that won a bunch of games this year. I'm looking around. I'm like, Shasara Williams, check. Reagan Beers, check. Peyton Verhulst, check. The Van sisters, Zaya and Skylar, they both hit shots. They both play confident. The 6'2" senior they bring off the bench, Liz Scott, plays big inside. Like they go like 7-8 deep legit with really good players. So if I had a bold prediction, it would be that Oklahoma is going to give UConn a run for their money. Maybe even advance. But as I'm looking at all the teams with a chance to do something that might shock people, I'm putting a little bit of stock in Oklahoma, even though I still have something to say on Paige and why I believe this is her time. But Oklahoma has me believing in them. I've just really appreciated what I'm seeing.
Oklahoma looked great. I'm actually, I'll be honest with you, just co-host to co-host here. I'm actually glad Oklahoma won that game because I know that you have been obsessed with Iowa over the past couple of weeks. Really,
Obsessed is a strong word,
and you've had a little bit of a hyper fixation
word
on Iowa. I'll say that, and I don't know if I would have been prepared to see what conversations would have looked like on the show tonight if Iowa messed around and won that game against Oklahoma. I don't know if I would have been
not even close to what you'll experience when Notre Dame wins the national championship. Not even close.
No, I know that.
I got something for that later too. Don't you worry. I got something for that.
But okay, Oklahoma giving UConn a run for the money. I mean, that's going to be a good game. I think
that's going to be UConn's best game so far. Easily.
I would say
like, this will be the first game that we see, which should happen in the Sweet 16. But like,
sure,
by far, this is going to be the best team that they've played so far and their best test.
Absolutely, it's going to be a good one to watch for sure. Nick, what's your bold prediction for the Sweet 16?
Ooh, a bold prediction, man. You know what? I'm really interested to see how Maryland plays South Carolina in this matchup. Coming off of, two really good rounds, which is actually crazy because, this is how crazy I am with the brackets. I actually had Norfolk State winning in the first round.
Hey man.
But I'm really interested though. I think this is going to be a really good challenge for them. Obviously, they were challenged in the last matchup against Alabama going into double OT. But South Carolina's a different beast. These two teams, they met in the tournament before. I think the last time was like 2023, I believe it was. So I'm really curious to see how they potentially come out, honestly. And I think if they do come out the right way, they could give South Carolina a challenge. Now, like, I'm still picking South Carolina to win, but I really do want to see how Maryland comes out and possibly challenge South Carolina. Like, I think if they can be strong on the defensive end, because I was really impressed with their defense against Norfolk State. I still got to go back and watch the Alabama game, but definitely in that Norfolk State game in particular, I was really impressed with the defense, especially in the first half. But I really want to see how they challenge them, honestly. Like I said, I'm still picking South Carolina to win, but I think if they play the cards right, they can make it competitive.
I will say, even though we all agree, and you said before, Nick, and we agree, South Carolina is the most proven and probably the most trustworthy one seed right now. They still, not that they struggled, but their last game against Indiana wasn't dominant. What they score? What was it? What they score? 67 points? Was it 67-58 or something?
Yeah,
that was that. And listen, Indiana's solid. They're good, but it was Indiana. Maryland is better than Indiana. They have more talent and they're better. So I'm not saying that to say anything other than this should be a decent game for them. Indiana was a decent game for them. Maybe they didn't play their best, but I think that's what makes it the Maryland matchup interesting. Another Big Ten team that's more talented than Indiana. And I'd be picking South Carolina too, but I think it's worth it to bring that up as possibly a worthy matchup.
I will say the one key thing about that you said at the beginning is if Maryland comes out right, because I don't know what is up with this Maryland Terps team, but it seems like every other game, the first half is just god awful. Like the Norfolk State game, as Martin put it in our text messages, was a very nasty game. Like Brenda Freeze had to rip them a new one, it seemed, in the second half for them, or in halftime, for them to come out there and get some act right. And then I'm watching this game, the Alabama game yesterday. It's the same thing. It's like I'm pretty sure Brenda Freeze went in there and ripped them a new one again. Now, I will say this: Maryland does give me reason to be concerned. As a fan of South Carolina, I do have concern. I think the big concern, and I think what likely will be the game plan, is I do anticipate Ali Kubik to get a lot of touches, and to get a lot of touches early against South Carolina, because what we have seen from South Carolina so far this season is that when they have a size disadvantage down low against whoever their opponent is, they don't do a good job of preventing that from being the point of attack. And we've seen a couple of times over the course of the season, especially later on in the season, where Maryland has made it a point to get Ali more involved in the offense earlier as opposed to later on. She had a couple of big shots late in the game against Alabama. In fact, I was texting Martin before he got to overtime. There was a point when Cheyenne Sellers wasn't hitting her shots, Kayleen Smichael wasn't hitting her shots, Sarah Tibiaso wasn't hitting her shots, but Ali Kubik was out there hitting her shots, and that's she kind of started the fire that then Sarah Tibiasu and Cheyenne Sellers kind of ignited to get them over the hump to actually win that game. But I am genuinely concerned as a South Carolina fan about this matchup against Maryland on Friday, because it's not as favorable as you would think it is, right? Like, this is still, they don't have the championship pedigree that South Carolina has, but this is still a veteran basketball team that is led by one of the longest tenured coaches in the country, one of the most successful coaches in the country, one of the most successful coaches in the country in this tournament. Like, Brenda Freeze's track record in March Madness it pales in comparison to very few active coaches in the country right now. So I am genuinely concerned. And Nick, you're right. This might be the one where maybe, if Maryland can come out on their act right and look like they've, were one of the very few undefeated teams left in the season, to start the season, they might be able to knock the South Carolina team off. And just the thought of that just is making my blood pressure go up. It's ridiculous that I have to sit down and watch this game on Friday at 5 o'clock.
It's a double whammy for Marcus, because he's a South Carolina fan and he's from the DMV.
Yeah,
I'm a 45-minute metro ride from Maryland, so it's like I don't win either way. I will be more upset if South Carolina loses than I would be if Maryland loses, obviously. But it's going to be a tough one to watch for sure. Before we get into my bold prediction, let's go back to, I believe it was the same episode from Martin's clip where I listed my Final Four teams, and I said that I trusted one team in particular over some others. LSU could shock the world this season and win the whole thing. Like, I think they are capable of that. We talked about Flau'jae Johnson and how great she's been. There was a point in time at the beginning of the season when we talked about her being one of the 5 best players in the country. She's not in that conversation anymore, I don't think, but she's still having a very, very, very good year. Same thing for Michaela Williams, and Anissa Morrow continues to be great. She's picking up right where she left off last season. I believe she is leading the SEC in double-doubles again. She's leading the country in double-doubles, I think, again, and I think she's the front runner for SEC Player of the Year. And if there's anyone not named Michaela Bliggs who can win the award, it would be her. I like what I've seen from LSU and a little bit that I've seen from them. And again, being a team coached by someone in Kim Mulkey who has the experience, for what it's worth, also, like, they were one of the last teams to be undefeated this year. Like, I think they can be one of the last 4 standing. And I certainly trust them more than I trust a UConn or a USC.
Oof.
So a lot has happened since that clip. A lot has happened.
What date was that? You don't mind me asking? Like, do you know exactly what date that was?
That was, I can pull it for you after the show.
February 21st.
It was around
21st.
It was about a month ago. Okay.
Yeah. Martin pulled the clip. He would know the date. Yeah. So it was about 5 weeks, about a month ago. Martin, do you remember my Final Four teams when we did that show? Do you remember the 4 teams I put into the Final Four?
I know South Carolina and LSU were in there. You had US. No, I had USC. You didn't have USC. I think you had UConn and UCLA.
My Final Four teams when we did that show were South Carolina, Notre Dame, LSU, and UCLA. Those are my 4. That was before Selection Sunday, obviously. So LSU and the UCLA are obviously now they're in the same region, on the same side of the bracket, and they're heading on a collision course. So I have to make a decision. I have to
Yes, you do.
decide.
Yes, you do.
I have to decide which one of those two teams are going to make the Final Four. After watching both teams play basketball over these past two rounds of the tournament, I feel very, very strongly that LSU is going to be in the Final Four. I think LSU can beat UCLA. I really do.
We got to think too. They got to go against NC State first too.
That's a
we have
fact.
to go against NC State too.
I do think they're going to win that. I do think they win that.
I do think they win that matchup as well. But there's a couple reasons why I think LSU is better equipped and more likely to make the Final Four than UCLA. The number one reason for me is, and Martin and I had this conversation briefly because Martin was talking about how there are certain teams that he trusts, like the team that he trusts the most offensively, defensively. I think you said experience-wise, talent, and Big Three or something like that are all different teams. And we talked a little bit about like these Big Threes. Of all the teams that are left, I don't think there is a team that you could say undeniably their three best players at their best, like you can say case closed, are better than Flau'jae Johnson, Anissa Morrow, and Michaela Williams at their best, right? I think it's a preference thing. I think if you wanted to take Notre Dame's Big Three ahead of them, you could, and I wouldn't get mad at you. I think if you wanted to take South Carolina's Big Three ahead of them, you could, and I wouldn't get mad at you, right? But they are pound for pound, the three of them, Johnson, Morrow, and Williams. They are three of the best players in the country, and they're I think the strongest unit at their best. We saw that in the game against Florida State. They all had great games. Obviously, Flau'jae Johnson only had like 13 points. He was 58% from the field, and they got some help from Samaya Smith, I believe it was, who had 20. But the three of them all together at their best. The other thing, too, is, and this is a big part of it at this point, is Kim Mulkey is one of, at worst, the fourth best coach left in the tournament, I think. She's at worst the fourth best coach in the tournament, not just because of her resume, but just because of how good she is as a coach. And I think if you match up LSU with UCLA, I think they're going to win. And I think the big reason why is because when I watched that UCLA game and I watched them play against Richmond, and they go into half 36-36, the big thing that everyone's talking about, Chris Williamson, who we've had on the show, is talking about it. I think you, even Nick, brought it up. I know I brought it up a little bit from the page, and a couple other people brought up is the fact that there were too many possessions down the floor where UCLA just wasn't getting the ball to Lauren Betts. And when you have a 6'7" mismatch, when you have a 6'7" monster in Lauren Betts, who has been the best player in the, one of the best players in the country. She was dominating, very early on in the season until Juju kind of flipped the switch and took off down the stretch. Like, you get her the ball every single time down the floor. And I think that is going to be indicative of what we might see in a potential LSU UCLA matchup. Like, if the UCLA that we saw, what was that, Sunday night, that's not feeding Lauren Betts, that's needing, that's not really clicking offensively until later on in the game, that is a team that LSU can take advantage of, and that's a team that LSU can beat. I like what I saw from LSU against Florida State. I like what I've seen from LSU throughout the course of the season. I am still very much of the mindset that Anissa Morrow should have been the SEC Player of the Year. I thought she was one of the best players in the country this season, and I don't know if UCLA has enough from everyone. I don't know if UCLA will get enough from everyone not named Lauren Betts to beat LSU, right? Like Martin and I talked about the Kiki Rice component and how she hasn't really yet lived up to the hype of her name and, who she was coming out of high school, right? Janiyah Barker, the transfer from Texas A&M, she's had a couple of shining moments here and there, but we haven't really seen her put her stamp really on this team or on a game since she's been there. And I think if you're asking me to match up the three best players in LSU and the three best players at UCLA, and it's going to come down to that, I would take LSU every single time. And so because of that, I think LSU is going to be the team to represent their region in the Final Four. I think if there's a one seed other than Texas to not make it to the Final Four, it would be UCLA. Obviously not considering the fact that USC doesn't have Juju anymore.
I'm not mad at that, honestly. I'm not mad at that. I mean, I think that's been one of UCLA's biggest issues is not feeding Lauren Betts the ball. Like, I've been saying it for a long time now. Like, Lauren Betts is literally a cheat code. Like, you saw what she did even in the Richmond game when they were getting her the basketball. Like, she shot like 7 for 8 in the first half, but the game was still tied at halftime. Why? Because you're not feeding her the ball enough. But also, when you allow her to get low post position, obviously she has an advantage against opposing bigs, but she's able to open up the floor for somebody else just because of how dominant she is. So that opens up opportunities for a Kiki Rice to get open shots. It opens up opportunities for like a Gabriela Jaquez or Janiyah Barker to get open opportunities on offense because of how much attraction that Lauren Best generates. And I think that that's honestly been one of the biggest downfalls, is not feeding her enough. It was the biggest downfall even last year whenever they faced LSU in the Sweet 16, was not getting Lauren Best the ball enough, honestly. So I think that's what it really comes down to, honestly. But I agree with you. I mean, when you talk about LSU, I know I've been very critical of LSU, not because of their team, but just, when you look at the schedule, they didn't play against a lot of like the tough teams, especially in non-conference play. Obviously, SEC is a little bit different because I think SEC is probably the best conference in the country, if not the second best or whatever. But I think when you look at how well LSU has played, I mean, obviously in the game against Florida State and then, of course, in the game against San Diego State, I think this NC State game is going to determine a lot for me. And I think, depending on how they come out in this game and depending on how they win in this matchup, I think that's going to guarantee me, whether they are capable of getting in the Final Four or not. Because even before you do face UCLA, you still got to get through a team like NC State. And NC State has been obviously one of the best teams in the ACC, but their guard play is really tremendous. When you talk about Isaiah James, Sanaya Rivers, Zoe Brooks, just the overall guard play, how well they play, honestly. So that's gonna be a fun matchup as well, honestly. But I agree. I mean, I think if you look at both of those teams and who has a better advantage getting to the Final Four, I probably got to go LSU as well.
You brought up her name before, Nick, and I will say, Michaela Williams is becoming more and more the key for that team. Especially with Flaugier coming back for her injury. You mentioned before, like she's not really doing as much. Her volume isn't that high. Michaela Williams being there is the perfect offset to whatever drop off Flaugier may have right now, because Michaela Williams is probably even a more gifted scorer than Flaugier is.
I agree.
The kind of shots that she creates for herself, the reverse pivot joints that she gets off, she can get any shot she wants off. And yeah, I did say, Marcus, who did I say needs to kick up for UCLA to win it all? Say it again.
Kiki Rice.
Kiki Rice. And in that kind of matchup, LSU UCLA, I see the guard. I mean, I'm biased towards guards, but like that guard matchup is going to be huge because LSU has special on the perimeter. Mm-hmm. UCLA had good on the perimeter, but in a game like that, you might need special. Because I think Michaela Williams, even in this NC State game, that NC State game is going to be pound for pound. A lot of good scorers on both ends. It might be similar to the Florida State game, actually, but NC State has even more scoring firepower than they did. So LSU, NC State, that's going to be a matchup, and that's the kind of game where a Michaela Williams or a Zoe Brooks or an Isaiah James really has like that kind of performance that propels their team to the next round. And that, that can create momentum. But right now I'm looking at Michaela Williams on LSU side as she's looking ready to be special from the perimeter. And that's going to make a difference in the NC State game and definitely in a matchup against UCLA.
I think that NC State LSU game might be the best game of the Sweet 16.
Yeah, I agree. I'm really excited for that one.
That might be up. That game might really be up.
It's going to be a really, really good basketball game. I think it's funny because I thought, and I know they mentioned on the broadcast as well, and I think I tweeted this as well, that we all thought, and it was a little bit, we all thought that the LSU Florida State game was going to be like a track meet or in a shootout, and it felt like that a little bit until LSU pulled away. LSU NC State might be the track meet that we all thought that Florida State LSU was going to be. Like those are two teams that like to get on the fast break. Those are two teams that can both get up and down and who can change momentum on a drop of a dime. That's going to be a really, really, it's going to be a good game. It's going to be a very entertaining game. That game I think that game's going to be the best game of the weekend for sure. It, like, hands down, will be the most exciting game of the weekend.
That's a big one.
That's going to be a big one. Do you guys have any last closing thoughts before we get out of there? I know Nick's got to get over to do his own show tonight in a couple minutes. Do you have any more thoughts before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I got a couple things.
Go right ahead.
I'll just say that I do think that it might be Paige's time. it's feeling like this might be Paige's year for a few different reasons. One, I just wanted to highlight, of course, she broke some more UConn records and she's going out on a high note, but her efficiency is now going down as historic. She's the only player in basketball history, college, NBA, or WNBA, to have a 50-40-90 season. For people who don't know, that's shooting at least 50% from the field, 40% from three, 90% from the free throw line, while leading the country in assist to turnover ratio. It's never happened in the NBA, in college, or the WNBA. She's led the country in turnover to assist ratio, 4.8 to 1.2. So that means for every 4.8 assists she's getting, she's got 1.2 turnovers. That's absurd. I also think her leadership is on another level right now. I saw a dope story about how she's preparing food for her teammate El Alfi, who's celebrating Ramadan, who is acknowledging Ramadan right now. She's getting up and making her avocado toast and scrambled eggs in the morning. And I saw other UConn players are supporting her too, which is awesome, which I think speaks to the culture, but also it starts like with hearing that from Paige's leadership and then seeing how that team is just supporting each other, even around something like that might seem insignificant, but it matters when it comes to the dynamics of the team. And then I just think Paige's humility is where it needs to be. When you hear her after that game asking, like, they kind of want her to say, yeah, we're ready to win the national championship. Yeah, we feel like we're ready. Yeah. She's just like, we're just trying to take it a game at a time. She's not even talking or walking or feeling cocky. It seems like she is really in the right kind of zone. Obviously her team is healthy. Like, ever since that South Carolina game, it has felt like UConn is kind of back. And I think Paige's demeanor right now, even how we've talked about Marcus, how she may not be like the boisterous, scorer and doing all these flashy things, but she can still get 30. She just tied her career high, in that last NCAA tournament game, albeit against a South Dakota State team that literally could not hang with them. But she's looking like, you could say she might be starting to play her best basketball again, which is the right time for her to be looking that way. So while observing her and how UConn is playing, Sarah Strong, AZ Fudd, just the confidence and with Paige at the helm. And you also have to remember, she's seen it all at this point, fellas. I mean, she's been to the big game. She's been to the Final Four. She's seen defenses. She's seen Caitlin. She's seen this person, that person. She's seen it all. And, not to bring it back full circle and make it a thing, but, with Juju down, it kind of only opens up a bigger lane for, it's
a big advantage,
but it's the reality of it. Their best player is down. It creates even more of an advantage for your team. So, it sucks we won't get the Juju versus Paige, another matchup, but the path is there, I think, for Paige. It might be a UConn South Carolina national championship. We'll see. But I want to close out by saying this. Oh man, I gotta get the camera on for this, man. I'm not doing this without this on the record. Because we didn't go into this game. I don't know how y'all feel, but this is the last thing I got to say on this here show tonight. TCU, VCU, CPU. Notre Dame in 5.
I couldn't agree with you more.
You understand what I'm saying, Nick? Hey, Haley Van Lith, Revenge of the Sith, wearing kids while I'm drinking the fifth. Notre Dame in 5. I ain't trying to hear it. You know what I'm talking about, Nick? Hey, what Sedona Prince, Mike Pence, Carson Wentz. Ain't heard from them since. Notre Dame in 5. That's all I got for y'all. Good night. See y'all at the Final Four.
Hey, son.
I couldn't agree more.
Come on now.
Ain't seen them since.
TCU, VCU.
I'm just gonna be real. Like, just also touching on that game, Hannah Dog was gonna take that matchup against Haley Van Lith personal. People forget, like, and I think it was November, like right after Thanksgiving, they both matched up, and TCU won that matchup. So this is like a revenge game right here for them, for Notre Dame.
Personal. The personal Hannah is the worst kind. Just get ready.
The closer I'm gonna say this and then we're gonna go. The closer we get to the Final Four, and the closer we get to other potential okay, Notre Dame and South Carolina matches up in the Final Four. We might need to. Martin and I probably won't be able to coexist for 30 minutes that week to do a show. We might not be able to do it. I don't know if I'm prepared to see, and I keep saying this, but like the closer we get, the more it feels like a reality. I don't think I'm prepared to see reality where Martin Soares gets to live in a world where Hannah Hidalgo is a national champion and she's beaten South Carolina and UConn, LSU, or UCLA to do it. I don't think I am mentally prepared to see that version of Martin Soares exist on this programming every week. So until then, thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys all who tapped in live or who are tapping in with us on the playback. We appreciate, as always, our guy Nick Andre for stopping by and chopping it up women's basketball with us. It's been a minute since he's been back. Hopefully it's not that long until he returns. So for my guys, Nick Andre and Martin Soares, this is Marcus of the Protect Our Queens podcast signing off. Thank you guys for watching. And as always, you guys enjoy yourselves some women's basketball.